This content is brought to you by Huawei.
What I love about being an entrepreneur is that I can basically create the environment I'm working in and the job I have. I was always bored after maybe 2 years being in a job, and I always asked for more responsibility.
Yes.
This was a huge issue of me because I was always on the brink of being overworked, but that's just the nature of myself. And so the sad thing is when I left one of my corporate roles, they had to hire 3 people after me. And
3
it's like,
people, wow.
It was just
You
depressing.
definitely were underpaid. Whatever you got paid, it was
that was exactly the depressing part. I was so much underpaid.
Welcome to this insightful conversation that was produced by Video House and is proudly sponsored by Huawei. I'm your host, Cedric Bullock, and in this episode, I have an exciting conversation with Sandra, the founder of Futurae. Futurae is on a mission to build trust without the inconvenience. Their platform offers flexible authentication solutions to increase online user security. But it doesn't stop there. Futurae understands that authentication and transaction confirmation can unlock more than just security. Across industries, their platform enables flawless customer experiences, real-time decision-making, fraud prevention, and customer insights analysis. Join us as we dive into the inspiring journey of Futurae, discover how they are revolutionizing user security, and explore the valuable applications of their platform. This is an engaging conversation with Sandra, a visionary leader shaping the future of authentication. Thank you for being part of our community. Let's explore the world of Futurae together. Enjoy. So Sandra, thank you so much for being here. It's a great pleasure. I think we made a video 3 years ago, 4 years ago. So I'm very, very privileged and honored to be part of your journey and to see, how you have progressed in the last couple of years. It's just nice to see, when you are part of a journey of someone and see how it progresses. So I'm
Likewise.
very excited. Thank you. So I'm very excited, to have this conversation with you. Nevertheless, for the sake of our protocol, we have to start from scratch. So we have to take our audience on the journey from the very beginning. So maybe give them a quick background about, what Futurae is doing.
Sure. So Futurae is helping people getting very quickly seamless access in a secure way to online services. Web, mobile, any sort of digital user interface that you might interact with to get something, sensitive information, make a payment, whatever it is.
So basically saying like if right now I have like 17 different logins for all kinds of things, Futurae will change that or is changing.
Yes, we embed those logins into a user experience that you don't have to have several apps or something, but you can embed it into whatever mobile application that you have. But also we innovate all around those typical problems that you might come across. Like one example, when have you changed your last time your smartphone?
I switched from Android to iPhone
This is a tough one.
I switched about, how much was that? Like 3 months ago?
Oh, wow. Okay. And I have a lot of questions there. That's maybe for another time. So how long did it take you to reactivate everything? Because you couldn't just do backup restore.
That's a good question. It took me some time. I think it was more seamless than I anticipated. I think the process from transferring from Android to iPhone, they optimized pretty nicely.
Yeah.
But overall, somewhat.
It's like we have all been in this situation.
They lost
like
a lot
you
of
have to
forgotten passwords.
Yes. And like the worst is like the highly regulated products like banking apps.
Yes.
Till you reactivate them, payment apps. So sometimes you have to do re-identification. Sometimes you have to go to branches, having letters or reorder letters, all of that stuff. So we innovate around those things. We make user experience very seamless, but then we also create insights for the customers. So for the highly regulated companies to make sure that fraud cannot happen. So we preemptively inform them about very sophisticated fraud types that might come up in the future. And that's what we do.
I remember vaguely, maybe you have changed since then, but like that you take the surrounding audio as a verification, no?
This was a prototype at DTH. It has been a long time since we met. Yeah, I mean, we have still this philosophy to innovate around authentication. So we have large variety of different ways how to do this. And we strongly believe in not one fits all. Mm-hmm. So I give a very simplistic example because it's tangible. So maybe you're used to use a QR code to scan to pay, make a payment.
Yes.
This is maybe something in a consumer environment that makes totally sense. But in a bank, you do not want to motivate people to use their smartphones in front of screens because it's just not a behavior in a bank that is really permitted. So that's why there is no one fits all. And what we do is anything from the very commonly known authentication to fraud insights to very novel ones. And to come back to the question, we still see in the future that there is a need to sophisticate authentication because biometrics is really cool and user-friendly, and we also have biometrics, but there is an unsolved problem. It's you can't recreate biometrics. Right. So in the future, if there is any sort of sophisticated deepfakes, phishing attacks like that concerns many of our data points, it's game over. And that's why we're in research looking also a bit ahead of time. Where is the journey going? And context allows a lot of very interesting things to do. Like context is anything from in environments you're typically in, co-located devices that you have, like anything around you. It's not you, it's things around you. And this allows you to do things in a seamless way or detect anomalies when it's not typical. Yeah. And that's why we put a lot of
first of all, I'm happy to hear that I'm not the only one who has to pivot once in a while or scratch certain ideas.
It's involvement. It's one is
learnings.
based on the other. Yeah, yes. Exactly.
But tell me this about the bank. Like I'm always curious because those are these nuances that like it's very hard for outsiders to understand like what you go through. So one second, I mean I know banks, they have big red flags when you bring cameras into their buildings that I've experienced firsthand. But
oh yeah, as someone taking video shots,
yes, it's a bad idea.
I can imagine.
But tell me, what do you mean? Like having a phone in a bank, that's a red flag for them, or that's not allowed?
No, I mean depends. Look, there are always use cases where this is not maybe the best practice or not permitted for obvious reasons. Trading floors. You don't want to bring smartphones to trading floors for obvious reasons, like insider trading or like I can quickly inform my friend to make a large transaction because I know something is happening. So, but no, it's just like on the one hand side, there are different requirements regulatory-wise, so different levels of security required depending on what you secure. But then there are just like use cases where you want to let people feel the security, and there are use cases where you really don't. And like there is no one fits all. And I think what we have this product that can configure to all these different use cases, because you might have even, let's take the example of a bank, you might have very different user groups that need to be served differently. One example, classical example, corporate customers, SMEs. So this is flower shops, this is accountants, this is any sort of industry producing entity. So the people that work for those companies do not necessarily have a smartphone, and they might still need strong authentication and secure access to online services. So if you can't force your employees to use their private smartphones for business matters, and you can't afford to give them all a new device, smartphones. And so that's why like we also complement things that we do, our software components with hardware components. There's just not one fits all. And there are always use cases where one works very nicely and you embed it, you're entirely invisible, it's really fancy. And another one where might be you psychologically want to add a component that people are reminded every single time of something.
Got it. Tell me, I mean, obviously like everybody, or it's at least in the Western world, I would say has a smartphone these days. And I assume the market is huge, but maybe you can elaborate a little bit of kind of like what you tell your investors, like how big this opportunity actually is. Like where do you see the biggest opportunity for you right now? I
mean, look, it's so interesting and so exciting because when we started, consumer authentication or identity in general was just very new. Yeah. Like workforce protection was there for a long time. People are known to use comparable products like ours in a workforce environment for many years to secure VPN or Citrix or any sort of thing. But consumer, like that we moved to a digital space to do services online has just started, and it started in highly regulated industries, but now like it's all over the place. So we're not only see growth coming from like specialization into verticals we are already very strong in that grow their user base and the types of product and sophistication, but we really see like the expansion on a horizontal level, because now you see digital identities appearing in a public environment. So the reusable digital identities that you can maybe across the Europe use at one point to identify yourself whenever you're moving, let's say from Switzerland to the Netherlands, you don't have to go to an office to identify and to prove your identity. It's something really powerful. And so for us, like we're going in both directions, the vertical and the horizontal expansion. And that's where the markets are going so tremendously.
So tell me, like you mentioned like the authentication, what actually already exists from your product? What our clients are using at the moment?
I mean, we have everything from strong authentication, secure payments and transactions, to really having this platform that creates insights across the customers. We don't know at no point in time who the customers of our customers are. We're privacy preserving. So we're sitting on top of the digital identity. But we can see if there is some type of anomaly coming up that could come from a new type of attack or sophisticated, I don't know, social engineering attempt or whatever. And we can preemptively inform all of the customers and even their customers about potential future damage. And that's these three components that are consisting, that are making our product.
Yeah. So let me ask you something straight out. You have raised a lot of money in the last couple of years, if I remember correctly. Maybe you can give me a quick history of like when and how much you raised over the last couple of years.
Sure. So we raised our seed round in 2018, which was 2 million. And when you say a lot of money, comparatively, we're really capital efficient. And also, like when I compare to peers in the US, it's like embarrassingly efficient. So we have raised our seed round in 2018. We have raised our A round in 2021, which is 5 million.
Okay, so a total of 7 million?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Tell me, so now when you're looking back, which of the investors you feel like were actually really helpful during that process?
I mean, we did deliberately choose very complementary people that are in our board. I think they're all very different personalities and they help in their own capacity. I mean, it's a mix of type of investors. Some are large international VC firms and other ones are local upcoming VC firms. So they all have very different maybe networks, but also motivation or capacity to hands-on help and everything. I mean, we have all active investors. So they help in different areas. Like I can't say that I would not want to exchange any of them. So I'm very happy.
No, because like I can tell you, like I'm a big fan of Sasha and Herman, and I know Equity Pitch invested by you, so I think that's public knowledge. I think again, like I'm a big fan of them.
Likewise, they're entrepreneurs themselves, so you can really see where they're coming from. They understand and they're pulling strings. Like they really bring in their network and help and assist. Yeah. No, we're also really excited to have them on board.
I think that overall, I think what's still missing in the Swiss startup ecosystem, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like the exchange of information publicly also about like what investors are helpful for, not necessarily bashing, saying what they do bad, not at all, it can be, but like primarily about like where can they actually add value. And you know, if you look at all of these websites from these VCs, they all write, we add value to the startups.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I am very diligent when investing, like when doing investment rounds. What we have done is we have really done due diligence asking portfolio companies, not only the ones that are really the high flyers in their portfolio, but we have asked specifically for a diversity. For maybe problematic journeys in the portfolio. And this is so insightful. This gives you so much.
What did you ask them? Like,
I asked them like, how do you feel supported during like whatever time? I mean, it depends when this was, but how specifically they helped, like, very concretely. Like what did they do when you had like lost this major customer and it was a cluster risk or whatever? Like how did you react and what did they concretely do and how did they address this topic in the next board meeting? How was the board meeting? Concretely, like how frequently are you in touch with them? And who in the team is doing what exactly? And like,
that was helpful?
Really
or like what?
Yes, it was very helpful. Yeah. And also the other thing, don't underestimate, I mean, we have a small ecosystem comparatively in Switzerland, but it's a very powerful, like Bosch telephone. I don't know how to say.
Like
you know exactly who has a good reputation and who not. And I mean, asking a bit around if you're in touch with peer entrepreneurs, they're very clear
of like
VCs that you could put your hand into fire and you would always recommend, and others that have a bit of a reputation.
Yeah. I mean, like I always try to avoid the people who call me on a Saturday night to ask for sales numbers.
Yeah, that might be a bit of a wrong
get
angle.
a sense if these are the type of people, you know, that want to. But like again, like obviously it's very hard, and sometimes you also need the money. So like right now, the macro environment, sometimes they just tell you like take the money if you can get it. But
yeah, but also in Switzerland and Europe overall, I would say many companies have been always a lot more economical than maybe US or other peers. And so for all, like, I don't want to generalize, but I see many have done a way better, careful investment journey than maybe peers that just had an order of magnitude of larger investment rounds. And so like also valuations, it's not the same to what extent valuations are impacted in Europe than in the US and else.
Sure. So tell me, what's missing for the Series B? Like, what's holding you back now? What's your most important, like...
We plan to
I
our
hope so.
Series B. We're excited because also, again, our topic is very hot, like surprisingly hot it was compared to a few years ago. And I mean, we're looking really for investors that can help us with new networks. Global networks. So we're looking at Southeast Asia, like Northern America, like areas we have not, we have deployments, but we don't have customers. And the other thing is it's really difficult to find organizations that really have understanding of scaling highly regulated SaaS B2B. And this sounds like it should be easy to find, but it's not so easy to find organizations that have a track record in their portfolio. And for us, these are important components that we want to bring on board in the next VC.
Tell me, in terms of like how big this can get. So, sometimes, again, like I feel it compared to, let's say, where I hang out a lot in the Tel Aviv ecosystem or Israel ecosystem, the first question VCs and investors ask you, like, how big can this get? How will I get my liquidity back? When are you exiting the company? So here in Switzerland, again, like it's a very different environment. Sometimes they say like, okay, you have to build a sustainable company. But nevertheless, I think it's still important to have some kind of like a North Star, kind of like how big can this actually get? Where do you feel like this company can be in, let's say, a decade from now?
For us, I think what motivates us is that we want to help every single person in the world to make online access seamless. And so we're excited to build like levers, to use levers in the future where we have a bigger impact with our product. That's what drives us and what motivates us. Because we still see all of these awesome technology companies, but then they have a lot of crappy user journeys and experience. And this is something that is not anymore needed these days. And
so you're not dreaming of an exit or anything like this?
Exit only if it's really bringing us this lever and order of magnitude that we can't reach out else. I think that's the motivation for us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me, in terms of sales, I mean, again, at the moment, the macro environment is much more driven towards sale versus growth. How are you approaching this at the moment?
I mean, we're a security company, so we always had to balance like careful growth in the sense that we're doing something that millions of people use every single day. So if we fuck up, sorry, my Swiss German, this is like major problematic for our customers. So we have to grow with diligence and exceed expectations of what we do. We're not, I always make this an analogy, but we're not building a social media platform and one feature didn't work out, so trash it, next one. So we're like an Achilles first of our digital products of our customers. And so we have to be careful when we invest in growth and always need to make sure that our infrastructure is scalable to onboard like another new millions of users, and we are keeping track of new fraud that comes up and can address it in a fast go-to-market. So we need to be very close to our customer base to understand what's happening. So these components have always been way more important to us than fast or quick or like amplifying growth.
Interesting. Tell me when, I mean, like, again, growth is still an important topic. Like what kind of like KPIs are you looking at if to define, yes, we're actually growing?
Active users per month and annual recurring revenue still. I mean, that's giving us the permit to continue to drive growth
Yes.
and invest in our capabilities. I mean, the platform, again, requires a critical mass of users, so customers of our customers, to be able to leverage the insights. So, of course, the more customers we can serve, the better the quality becomes. And that's the exciting part of our product. Because we do this in a privacy-preserving way, we decouple the digital identity from this fraud layer.
Look, I really want to talk a little bit also about like the journey of entrepreneurship. You know, like you've been on this road now for a couple of years, I would say. What kind of like, if you reflect a little bit, how has it been? Like what are your first thoughts when you're thinking back now? Some nostalgia of the last, let's say,
Nostalgia.
the last couple of years.
I mean, for me personally, I think the earlier days were more stressful than the last years. Like different stress. But in the beginning, it was way more radical. Every single decision you took could be a dead or no dead consequence for the company and people that trust in you and your early teammates. So for me, that was way more stressful than now. As you have kind of a critical mass of customers, you understand how you can, which screw you need to turn to reach what. It's for me, there's still other challenges, but personally, it's less of stress than it was like raising our seed round, where nobody understood what we were doing back then. It was not a hot topic at all. And also security in Switzerland was not something that is very known. I think now things changed a lot and everything matured a lot. And for me, that's, it's more a safe environment I'm navigating in today than I was 6 years ago.
Right. For sure. I mean, like I see that like when you have a little bit of consistency, I remember, I think I once heard Jeff Bezos talk about it, that he needs to make a couple of decisions a year, but the right ones that will actually navigate the ship of Amazon through whatever comes. And I think that's the difference. Early stage is much more like, you know, you need to make sure not to drown that day.
Yes, exactly.
So it's actually very, very interesting.
But also you build a reputation and you build trust, and it's something you can't be taken away. I mean, you could if you do a bad job, but I think it's also something you build upon. And it's a very powerful thing that works.
For sure. I mean, like I realized that, like, you know, you slowly start to think a little bit more long term. I think like in my company, I'm now thinking about 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And I remember it used to be, okay, how are we paying the bills next week? And like now it's a little bit more, a little bit quieter, as you said.
A bit more air.
A little bit of air. Yeah. It's not even necessarily the cash in the bank.
You still do the
yeah.
But you have a bit of oxygen.
My wife keeps telling me that sometimes I call her in the morning, it's like, okay, that's it, we have to shut down. And then in the evening, it's like, oh, we got the new espresso.
We're going to be...
it's going to be great.
This very quick roller coaster up and down within a short sequence of time.
Yes.
I think this I can totally relate in early days. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about, you know, as a co-founder and also like the CEO, what kind of like leadership is it that like you are focusing on, that you feel like, okay, this is what you have learned over the last couple of years, maybe what you have done in a certain way at the beginning, and like now you realize maybe a different approach, maybe also because of the stage is better?
I think I'm always someone who is privileged to work with very high performing people around me. So my leadership style is to give a lot of freedom and try to keep obstacles out of the way of the team members. Of course, when you grow a company, you can't expect that everyone has that intrinsic motivation and that drive. So you need to build a diverse team that brings along mixed sort of personalities. And that's always been a bit a denominator in our company. We are very focused on and this is not some like cheesy way of saying, but we really have not even in the beginning articulated it, but we did it, was bringing people along with a lot of different backgrounds, like in all areas across the company. And this has created this very unique DNA. And so now I think it's a lot more difficult to defend this principle actively. In the beginning, it just happened naturally because you attract some people, in your network, you bring them on board. And now you need to a lot more actively think of how can you reframe some of the teams and how can you structure this going forward, enabling further growth. Mm-hmm. And that's super interesting, exciting, but also super challenging.
So like, are you saying like now when you're growing the team, it's getting much harder to keep this culture alive?
Yes, because you have a lot more people part of this construct that influence in the end the culture. Mm-hmm. And you need to a lot more actively invest into what a culture is and what not, and to put barriers, what is not permitted behavior, what is fostered behavior. What is,
for example, not permitted behavior that you've noticed?
I mean, for me, a big no-go is finger pointing.
Like they did that or didn't do that? Or?
He was it. It was not me or someone. It's like
you fire on the spot or what do you do?
One of our strongest pillars is we win as a team and we lose as a team. And it's absolutely unacceptable if someone is behaving against that value. And you would have a warning, but you have to be consequent. Otherwise, you're not credible if you don't live your values.
Yes. And he fired people on the spot?
Yes. Not on the spot, but with a warning. Yes. Because someone can have a very bad day. They're like, we always try to also grow people and self-reflect. But if someone does not embrace it and understand, then that's not a fit for us. We also put a lot of energy into making sure during the hiring process that the environment we can offer is really some that people can thrive in. So although they have the best credentials and the best package they bring, if what we can offer is not where they can thrive in, and vice versa, they don't fit the way how we interact with each other and culturally, it's not a fit, and we have to decline people that are not matching.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. I mean, for me, it's obviously also like finger pointing is definitely one, but I would also say for me is much higher communication because we are very remote first.
Yeah.
So if communication is bad and people come back to me after a week and say like I was sick, then I said like, well, it's tough, tough to work with.
If they don't tell you beforehand.
Yeah, no.
Or when it happens.
It's hard. Yeah, or like, hey, like I'm unavailable for like a week or so, or like I'm not feeling well, I'll be back in a couple of days, or I'm not.
But communication is a tricky one because communication is anything from can someone empathize over what piece of information is relevant for the other and put themselves into the shoes. Do they have the intellectual capacity to make sure that the people that they talk to understand what was said, so to verify. So it's like a lot of different things that can go wrong in communication, or they just like are struggling to use the right word or filter or whatever, not filter.
Interesting.
And so I think that's something I'm also very emotional about, constantly investing and constantly do trainings on a larger level with the whole team, but also on a one-to-one basis, because that's always something I think all of us can grow.
Sure.
And I'm very emotional, for instance, in the beginning, my two co-founders will quote me about this, emails. Like, I hate nothing more than poorly written emails. This is something that goes against my, like, everything. Okay. All my DNA is revolting. Like, put yourself into the shoe of the other person. What are you trying to convey as information? What is relevant information? And then concise it. Make it short.
Hey, ChatGPT, make it shorter.
I mean, I wish we had ChatGPT when we started. It would have been easier. Today, it's so much easier. But again, just for everyone to remind, don't put confidential information into ChatGPT.
No?
It's just something that is generic. This is perfectly fine. Yeah. But this is a good use case to use ChatGPT for.
Like concise emails. Yeah. It's an interesting thought. I mean, again, like I'm probably like not at the stage as you are, so I'm still hiring based on obviously my preferences. Yeah. And I think that like in a remote setting, you need someone who is actively communicating and you don't need to chase them for information. So
and what else is your preference?
So I think that like it's a lot about, as I said, communication, and there's various things. So from the moment like I start interacting, I definitely check how quickly they're replying to me. That doesn't have to be immediate, but if it takes 4 days for them to reply to an email,
on it and excited.
Yes. I think that like typos in emails is a big no-go. I think that especially if it's it's not working in the beginning, then it's tough.
It's only going to go to
south. No, I'm saying like, if it's the 17th email we're exchanging and there is a typo, no problem. But if the subject line is wrong, my name is wrong.
I know what you mean.
So it's like these little things that like have nothing to do with Harvard or ETH.
No, it's just a filter if someone cares or not.
And I'm not even sure if it's caring. I think it's more that like we are, as I said, we are definitely early stage in youth, so we still need all hands on deck. And I think if we're not communicating in the way that feels comfortable to me, as selfish as it sounds, it's going to be very difficult for me to establish a trust relationship with that person.
I can totally understand.
And the second thing is a task.
So. Also, sorry to come back to the baseline with the culture. I think if you're permitting someone to put that bar of quality, it's going to be a race to the bottom. Everyone else will orient themselves to that bar and not to a higher bar. Absolutely. And I think that's why it's a cultural issue as well.
Yeah. And then I always hire based on a trial task that they have to do.
Yeah.
So once I feel like, very rarely I do video calls. Mostly it's just emailing or texting. And then I do a trial task and then I see how they do that. It's usually very, very simple. It can be from someone I recently hired who is managing my emails because it's getting very hard. Just like, hey, write me an email and see. No, I give some.
I would have loved to review that task.
No, and let's see. Like I gave some context, obviously, not just like write me any emails, but like, and see how it goes, how quick the turnaround is and stuff like this. And then based on that and based how they review it, based how they, send feedback or like ask questions like, hey, do I need to include this or not? And recently from another entrepreneur, I heard a very funny line. He said like, it sounds like a you problem and not a me problem. So he says like, as the founder, like if I see that you are asking me questions about things that you should actually figure out yourself or Google knows, then like that's probably also not a fit that there is. Yeah, because like again, like we need someone who can think that for themselves, quote unquote, whatever that means for that specific role. But like again.
Honestly, I think that's the strength of self-reflected founder teams. Like knowing what you're not good at, bring someone along who knows that. It's perfect. Sure. And along the way, it's the same. Like that's why I'm really strongly opposing like the idea of, we're building a startup, so we bring a head of sales, we bring a marketing person. No, you should think of what do you cover today with your core team. Maybe you have already a lot of the different core competences covered with your team because they're just high flyers. Maybe you have one critical one, which is just communication or whatever, not covered. So bring along the next person that has this strength and to complement your team. I think this is one of the magic of founding or early stage startup compositions, and some that are not working. Sure. In my view, the self-reflection of understanding where you're good and what you need. And
I even took it to another level recently where I realized that there's a lot of like highly skilled people that we could definitely not afford. And I went up to them and I said like, hey, would you like to, be kind of like a hybrid between a consultant and hands-on?
Perfect.
And that I think is actually like something that I would highly recommend to people because you get like both of good worlds. So you have someone very, very junior, can be outsourced wherever in the world with someone very, very senior that you pay them kind of like a nice vacation a year. So they know they're not getting like compensated like crazy, but they think it's fun to be involved in a startup. And that
it's like a mini MBA. They learn a lot more than maybe on a training.
Yeah, and you train them exactly how you need with the speed of someone who is actually doing it right now for a different company. And I guess that's what I've seen, especially like now in Israel, where they have head of sales. Like just because you mentioned that position, which I'm looking at now, where I could never afford a person like that. But if I say like, look, keep your job, I need, let's say 2 hours a week from you together with a third person. And we establish over the next 2 to 6 months, like something really professional, the way you do it right now.
Really nice. And you oversee the process.
Honestly,
I think it's a brilliant idea. And also this idea that you need to hire everyone in your company. It's also something a bit old school. Yeah. I mean, in general, this is not only for startups. I think today you have so many other creative ways how to engage in ecosystems and bring along know-how in one way or the other that you should use than just thinking you need to recruit and bring them into your world forever. I mean, we have, for instance, today agile coach we have for some months.
Yes.
And the guy is just like a bit of in German, we call it Sorgetelefon.
Yes.
Like whatever issue someone has or friction between people because they can't communicate properly or something.
Psychologist, basically.
Yeah, it's like a psychologist. It's so powerful, and it's such a great person. And
Yes.
like he just comes in, he's totally disconnected. Like I don't want to have to do with him because it should be really on purpose. Like
It's not operational.
It's not operational, exactly. But it's someone that gives so many impulses and is so valuable for many people in the team.
Sure.
And there are so many other examples, as you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge is sometimes like then investors ask is, are they full-time, are they committed and stuff like
But
this.
this is also so old school. This is already a filter that you should not engage with this investor because they just don't get it.
Yes, for sure. For sure. So let's talk about, I recently read an interview with, what's her name? Eike, about Vestine from Luca Books.
Oh, yeah.
And she wrote about like every founder is either before, during, or after burnout. So I don't know if I agree with this, but what I do agree that it's very stressful. But like what I'm curious to know, and I also struggle with this sometimes, is about like inspiration, like how do you grow yourself? How do you get like inspiration? So is there any kind of like favorite book or podcast or a person that you would say like, like if that you turn to and you say like, okay, like, oh, we're really at this, low end of the entrepreneurial journey where you say like, okay, like,
Yeah, it's a good question. What I love about being an entrepreneur is that I can basically create the environment I'm working in and the job I have. And I was always bored after maybe 2 years being in a job, and I always asked for more responsibility.
Yes.
This was a huge issue of me because I was always on the brink of being overworked, but that's just the nature of myself. And so the sad thing is when I left one of my corporate roles, they had to hire 3 people after me. And
3
like,
people, wow.
It was just
You
depressing.
definitely were underpaid. Whatever
exactly,
you got paid, it was
that was exactly the depressing part. I was so much underpaid. But that's a bit of a nature. And that's why being an entrepreneur, I can a lot more steer the responsibilities that I'm excited about and and bring on board people that enjoy the other pieces that I might like a bit less. And that's why I'm so excited to have this. It's for me, I'm constantly reflecting on how can I change the job. And now I'm actually in the process of doing something, also rechanging a bit. And this is something I'm really, really, because I can really foster my curiosity to embark on new things. And the larger you are as an organization, the jobs become more specific. You can really specialize. But I mean, I would not have been able to do most probably this crazy journey if I didn't have peers, people that I can trust, that are in similar situations, they know exactly where you're at and what, sometimes low points you go through.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think for me, this was the most important. I didn't have any specific mentor, which is a pity. I always wanted a mentor, but I never found it. So
yeah, I mean, the definition of mentor is also not so clear.
Yes,
so sometimes
correct.
if you call, I don't know, I'm sure if you call Herman late at night, it's like, hey,
Absolutely.
he will answer. That's maybe mentorship, but
absolutely. I have a lot of people that do mentorship with me and I do mentorship for. It's just not an official mentor, like the one mentor.
Like a signed.
The signed, like something.
Yes.
But I think it's, for me personally, that's the most rewarding to do that.
For sure.
And just to take yourself out. For instance, what I'm also trying hard is not to work on weekends. I need these 2 days of a break to have a fresh view on things. And evenings can be super long. And I'm traveling a lot, so it's super long plus travel.
Yes.
But the weekend is kind of my protected area for very, very different activities that I can do that are complementing me.
So what are you doing during the weekends to turn off? Is there any activity?
Typically, I mean, it's so sad, but many times
Netflix?
I was social. No, it was very sad because many times I'm so socially overdosed because the weeks are so crazy, being all the time out with customers. And sometimes I really just do downtime and like just go to the forest or read books or something. Like really, I try. Now, the last few months I gained a bit more energy and I could kind of recalibrate. So I'm a lot more seeing friends and have just very different conversations about nothing related to the tech industry or startups or something. So I'm very happy to have friends that are giving me insights into very different lives. And
for sure,
I think really this balance is super important.
There's a world outside of the startup world.
Yes. Yeah, it's a reality check. But also I used to play a lot of music in the early days when we started. We still had our band. We stopped a bit because of...
What did you play? Which instrument?
I was singing.
Singing?
I played
wow, next
bass.
time I invite you to sing.
Yeah, and I played bass sometime. Not as good at... but that's our things. Like throughout the pandemic, I took bass classes, bass lessons. So this was something that also gave me a lot of... Like it was a very different trait that I could train and just removed me entirely instantly from all of the mess and like crazy days. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra. It's been a real pleasure. Felt like therapy to me to hear that I'm not the only one struggling day in day out. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I wish you continued success. I really hope it's not going to take another 3 years till we have our next conversation.
Would be nice.
But you know, for the matter, there was a pandemic in the middle, so it was a bit tough for everybody. So
true, like these 3 years were just
that is like 2 years. 2-3 years. It just
but best of success for you.
Thank you.
I'm excited to follow your journey as well.
Good. Thank you.